first part of our third module here, we're really going to discuss commercialization. What does that actually mean when you look at the SBIR STTR programs? Remember, one of the first things that we said about the SBIR and STTR programs is they're focused on bringing innovative solutions to the commercial market. So obviously that means you need some commercial potential. But how do they view commercial potential? Kind of why does that matter, and how do you go about it? Well, to start off with, commercialization is approached in a lot of different ways. At the heart of it, commercialization is just selling a product to someone after you've developed it. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to develop the entire product from scratch. You can actually integrate things. This could be something you licensed, but commercialization is there is a market for it. There is a potential. There is somebody, that there is a customer out there for this. There's a product that you can sell to them. There's a supply chain to get that product into their hands. All of these different facets are actually part of commercialization, because it's not only how can you sell that to the person, but really it's how do you get that into their hands? How do you actually get the raw goods to make the product out of it? How do you make sure that the lines are tight and the logistics are good for getting the supply to the manufacturer? Those are all part of that kind of commercialization focus. So when we talk about commercialization, and as far as it pertains to the SBIR and STTR programs, it's not just here's the product, here's the customer, they're going to buy it. Well, how are they going to buy it? What's going to drive them to buy it? Why are they going to buy it? Where are they going to buy it? How much are they going to buy it for? Those are all things that you kind of should be figuring out during the entire length of the project. Because remember, think about these as an entire project. It's not just a phase 1. It's not just a phase 2. It's not just a phase 3. This is your rampway to get something into someone's hands. And that is, again, because commercial merit is one of the guiding principles for these programs. Now, the good thing about commercial merit is they don't define how it needs to be commercialized. They don't define what are the metrics for commercialization. They don't define, is this a good market or is this a bad market? There just has to be a potential market there. There has to be a potential need that you're addressing. There has to be a potential customer at the end of the line. And we talked about this kind of briefly during the contracts and granting agencies, but remember, contracting agencies are a customer, granting agencies aren't. But both of them, you're going to have to find who that customer is. Even for the contracting agencies, you're going to have to go beyond the bounds of that governmental agency, of that governmental department, of that governmental entity, and find somebody else that's going to buy it. These are one of the biggest pieces of these programs is, are they actually supporting businesses and getting them to a market? Are they actually supporting innovation and making it into a commercial product? So you're going to have to approach those in some fashion during your phase 1, your phase 2, or the combination of them. And when we talk about a product, one thing to kind of keep in mind is there's different ways to actually look at a product. So obviously a product is, something like this. This is a physical product. This is something I bought. It's my personal thing. But the battery that goes in it is a product as well. But even beyond that, Logitech made this mouse, but they didn't manufacture this part. Nope, didn't mean to do that. They didn't manufacture the laser that went into this. They bought those from somebody else, and then they integrated that into their own product. So when you think about what your product is going to be, kind of keep that in mind. Is yes, it could be a physical good, or it could be an enabling component, or it actually could be a service. It could be a process. It could be an intangible good. Your product could actually be a license for somebody else to manufacture and create spin-offs. Product just means that there's something somebody's going to buy for some reason. What is that benefit? Why are they going to buy it? What does it mean to them? What is that value proposition? That thing that really speaks to that specific customer and they go, holy crap, I have to buy this. This solves the problem or the pain point I've been having for so long. I need this. It's not I want this, it's I need this. That need is what drives the growth for this product or other products you create based off of it down the line. Because really you are matching that that product to a customer, not the customer to a product. You build the product with that customer's needs, that customer's, have to haves, that customer's nice to haves in mind. You don't build the product and then find the customer that fits within it. That's a real uphill slog. And let me tell you a secret. Not many people are successful at that. And, this is one of the things that people always ask is, well, you talk about needs, you talk about needs, you talk about needs. Well, what is a need? Well, a need are things that are essential and required for somebody to do their job, for somebody to function better, for somebody to increase their livelihood. Wants are those things that are, nice to have. A lot of times it's that intrinsic value. It's not really recognized as something that's, worth looking into. It's just something that you go, oh yeah, it'd be nice to have this. And I guess if I run across one out in the wild, I might buy it. Those needs drive you. When you have a need, you immediately hop on Amazon and you go, this thing needs to be here tomorrow. I have to address this and I have to solve this. Wants are things that make someone's life easier. Needs are things that they have to, do. Needs are critical issues that have to be solved in order for someone to perform a function, perform an action, perform a duty, whatever that is. I always like to give an example here. So if I'm baking a cake, I have needs and I have wants. Needs are, something to mix it in, an oven, and basic ingredients, flour, milk, eggs. Mix those up, gonna have a cake. Gonna be a cake that sucks, but you're gonna have a cake. Those are the needs to making a cake. Now the wants are, yeah, it'd be nice to have a stand mixer. Be nice to have a double rack oven. Be nice to have, artisan sugar or whatever to put in there to make the cake better. But those are wants. They make it better. They make it easier. But the needs are addressed. Now, one thing to keep in mind here, though, is needs can and will change over time. So if I move from making a cake for myself to now I own a business making cakes and I got to turn out 60 of them in a day, well, all of a sudden my needs have changed. That stand mixer is no longer a want. That stand mixer is a need because I have to crank through batter, that I can't reliably whip myself. That dual rack oven, that's no longer a want. That is a need because I have to bake more in order to get product into somebody's hands to actually make revenue and to recoup my cost. So I realize it's a very strange example, but it is just an example of what is a need versus a want and how can needs actually change over time. But that also brings me to pain points. So that's one of the things you hear a lot when you look at the solicitations for these agencies, when you look at what they fund, when you look at their purpose, when you look at their goals, is there has to be a pain point you're addressing. So going back, and I apologize, to my cake. example. So, when I had the bakery, all of a sudden my needs changed over time. My need was a stand mixer, but I didn't have a stand mixer. That is a pain point. I have a need that is not being addressed. That's essentially what a pain point is. It's something that keeps somebody up at night, something that keeps them gnawing on their fingers, sprouting ulcers, just sitting there and sweating in anticipation. It's that thing that makes people buy something. Pain points are driven by needs. Pain points are driven by, I need to solve this. There is no solution right now. How am I going to solve this? Or I need to solve this. I know there's solutions out there. I need to do some research. That is a pain point. It drives me towards purchasing something because there is an unmet need that I have. And before we get too much further into commercialization, one thing to clarify, because it's constantly a question, and I realize why it's a question. I wouldn't say it's a valid question, but it is a question. And let's address it really quick. Everyone has competition. I hear you now. No, you have competition. Everyone has competition. So here's what we mean by everyone has competition. Competition is the way people are addressing their needs right now, the way they're solving their pain point right now. You may be making the most unique and revolutionary product in the world, something that's never been on the market before, something that's going to blow people away. But you're addressing a need. You're addressing something that people want to buy it for. And you may not have a competitor right now, but you actually do, and that's the status quo. How are they solving that right now? Because when it comes down to it, your competition might just be sweeping it under the rug and hoping it goes away. And we have an example here, and people often look at me strange when I give the example, but Jurassic Park is a perfect example of this. Jurassic Park was this thing that nobody had ever done, a dinosaur zoo. Well, usually you don't get eaten in zoos, but it's a dinosaur zoo. So where else can you go and interact with dinosaurs? Well, nowhere. You would go, they have exactly zero competition. There are no dinosaurs anywhere else. But that's not what they're competing on. They're not competing on dinosaurs. They're competing on entertainment value. People have a fixed amount of money for entertainment. They're competing with the likes of Disney World, movies, video games, books, plays, whatever it is. People want to be entertained. People want an experience. So Jurassic Park has to compete on that. They have to offer something that is so unique, so revolutionary, and so mind-blowing that people will sacrifice their budget for entertainment versus maybe they could get 1,000 more hours of entertainment if they went and bought books for how much it would have cost for the ticket. But it has to compete with that. That is what we mean by everybody has competition. Even if it is the most unique thing in the world, even if it is unheard of, even if it is just almost sci-fi, that's how new it is. There's competition out there for it. I like to give this example. When I went through an I-Corps program, one of the other teams was looking at making a piece of software. And the piece of software they were making seemed like it was valid. There was probably a need for it. And this piece of software would have saved people, money and time and energy. And so they went out and started doing customer interviews. And they found out from the customers that they interviewed, without that piece of software in their lives, some of them were losing $150,000 a year. But here was the question. Did that $150,000 matter to them? When they started asking that question, nobody cared about the $150,000. That was a known cost of doing business. And they were like, no, this sucks, but it is what it is. We lose the $150,000 and everybody does this across the board. So do you think they were addressing a pain point at that time? Do you think they were addressing need? Or was it something that people were just like, oh yeah, well, this is the way it is. And their competition was the status quo. Everybody was used to that. That was not a value proposition for them for integrating this new piece of software and potentially not losing that $150,000 a year. That was a known quantity. They were fine with it. They worked around it. So you kind of have to think about that when you think about market, competition, value proposition, and how are you going to explain that in one of these proposal packages? And so when you are trying to create that documentation, when you are trying to talk about that commercialization effort and that viability for commercialization, there's a couple of things that pretty much across the board you'll want to address. One is, what's the demand? What's driving this? Do people need this product or service? And how you validated it? Next one is, what is the market size? How large is it? How many people want this? How many people across the globe would buy this? How many people within the region would buy this? What is that overall market? And is it growing? Is it something that is, progressing over time? Is it getting larger? Is it getting smaller? If it's a shrinking market size, well, it's probably not going to be commercially viable. What are the economic factors that are involved? So, is this need a luxury item or is it a necessity? In times of recession, people eschew luxuries for necessities. So you can have a need that is a luxury item, and you can have a need that is a necessity. Necessity needs are going to trump luxury needs every single time because it's the thing that keeps people alive most of the time. It's not something that is, well, this is a need, but this isn't something that's if I don't have it, I'll die tomorrow. So knowing those economic factors, knowing how that market's going to grow, knowing how it's going to shift, knowing if there are outside political factors that are going to impact that market. It's kind of something to really be aware of when you look at that long-term viability for your commercial product. And then, also looking at the market, there are three big factors when you look at a market, because that's not just the size. It's how many people are in that market. What are the customers that make that market up? What's the saturation? So how many other people are in this space? That is the one nice thing when it comes to competition, when your competition might just be the status quo, is at that point, you don't have market saturation. There's nobody else out there. Whereas if it's something that 30 or 40 or 50 people are already selling a product for, well, how are you going to get there? How are you going to stand out above everybody else? What is it that's going to drive people to it? And ultimately, what can the market bear for a price? Are people going to pay for it? How much are they going to pay for it? Why are they going to pay for it? Those are all factors to kind of think of that you have to really answer and be ready to address when you want to claim that you have a viable commercial market. So that is really just kind of an overview and a brief on what is commercialization, how do you start to approach it, and how do you factor into it. In the next part of this module, we're actually going to dive down into market data. So when we talk about market, how do you pull that information together? What's important to focus on? And kind of what makes reviewers stand at attention and go, oh wow, this seems great. This seems like something that's viable. This seems like something that needs to move forward.